All right, hi everyone. I think we stand between you and the keynote. So try to hang in there because this is a super exciting topic of forecasting, which I know you're all really excited about. So quick introduction, my name is Jaimie Buss, VP of Sales of North America for Zendesk. I've been there this is my 5th quarter. So I started December 2016, so did Ron Xiao. Ron is our Director of Sales Operations. She covers success, marketing, and of course, sales as well. For those of you that are not familiar with Zendesk, just real quick, we are a customer service platform, customer service and support platform. So probably most of this room knows what we do, but I figured I'd start there so at least you know. We're SaaS. We have about 119,000 customers, which produces its own set of challenges. So we're going to go through some of that today. So let me see here. I'm going to go past that. All right, so what is the goal of forecasting? Right? Industry standard, you want to hit within 5% of your commit. Ron and I, with the exception of one quarter, have been within 1%. Only one exception. We're going to go through the reasons why we missed once, actually. We have a slide that shares with you some of the pitfalls we found and discovered in our process of forecasting here that hopefully you guys can use and leverage as well. So how do you get within 5%? Well, you need to know which deals are going to close, right? And how much. Those are obvious. But the most specific thing that at least I found when I came to Zendesk was when. Because I walked into this really nice pipeline of deals, but then I'd listen to the forecast call and I'd be like, there is no way this is a Q4 deal. Like, what is this doing in my Q4 funnel, right? So we had to come up with a methodology of managing a couple ends of the business here. So that's the goal that we're trying to reach. So when Ron and I got to Zendesk, the first thing we realized is we were not in Kansas anymore. And what do I mean by that? How many people in this room, when you go to forecasting, you look at your funnel and you know on average how much you're going to convert, and you do some math and you figure out estimate, okay, well, based on what I have, I'm going to convert 25% of that or something around there, and you can kind of get an estimate of where you're going to land, right? I mean, everyone's done some form of funnel math before, right? Well, we had to do some funnel math, but there was a whole long tail of math that I had no idea how to handle, right? We had online customers, we had people that were touched by sales, but then they would go and buy online. I mean, think about it. If you have 119,000 customers, you're adding a lot of people every month and every day. So we realized we're not in Kansas anymore. We're going to have to think of this in a new way. We're going to have to really think about our forecasting from 2 different perspectives. So I'm going to hand it off to Ron to walk through how we handled kind of that long tail aspect of the business, just so you guys know, to give you a frame of reference. If you ever hear us talk about our velocity business, because sometimes I slip up and I know I bring it up, Ron might as well, we're referring to the business under 100 employees. And if we talk about territory or enterprise for Zendesk, we consider that over 100 employees, just to keep it simple. So the velocity component and to some extent the territory component, you got to do a lot of math. So I'm going to hand that off to Ron, because she's really been my partner in crime in figuring out how do I do this math component of the forecast.
Now can you hear me?
You can use the mic. It's a fail-safe. All right. Thanks, Jaimie, for that intro. Now you can hear me? Yes? Perfect. I don't think I need this. The mic is good. And yes, we were definitely not in Kansas anymore. Over the years, Zendesk has grown into a highly complex, very matrixed business. So we have one very different customer segments, as Jaimie sort of alluded to. We have our SMB space, our enterprise space, our strategic enterprise, as well as our named account segment. On top of that, we have, very different sales territories as well as sales teams. So as you can see here on this matrix, we have in AMER, we have the East and the West teams. As we scale, we will probably grow into Central, Southeast, Southwest, etc. And then on top of that, Jaimie also alluded to this, we have the entire gamut of sales process and sales motions. So on one side, we have our long tail SMB space, high velocity, high frequency sales. And then on the other extreme, we have our true enterprise sort of sales motions, which, as you can imagine, you all work in sales and marketing and success. They require very different sales motions, sales processes, as well as forecasting methodologies. So in order to think about all of these different parts of our business, you can obviously cut this in a lot of different ways. To keep it simple, Jaimie and I think about it by deal band size. So let me walk you through what that means. So here on the bottom, we have our SMB space. So these are our self-service, credit card swipe, sometimes no sales assisted deals. They're under $10,000 in annual bookings or ACV. At Zendesk, they are under 10 seat deals, typically covered by your inside sales rep. And because of what Jaimie just mentioned with the high velocity, high frequency, there's no way we would be able to get our arms around every single deal here. So this is where data, information, statistics come into play, and this is where we need the sort of QIQ, which stands for quarter and quarter, which is deals that are created and closed within the quarter. This is where we need the Q&Q and trend math to help us with forecasting in this space. On the other extreme, we have our sort of Fortune 10, Fortune 100 companies. So think of this as, at Zendesk, for instance, we have 50,000 ACV deals all the way up through multi-million-dollar contract value deals. And these are the deals where you have your, very senior, very seasoned field sales reps walking the halls of the IBMs of the world, of the Hewlett-Packards of the world. And as you can imagine, these are very complex, very long deal cycles. And because of that, this requires a totally different type of methodology to forecast accurately. So here, it requires you to use a more formalized sales process and framework to be able to actually forecast. And Jaimie, in the later part of the presentation, will talk about MEDPIC, which is one of the frameworks we use to forecast the enterprise space. And then for a lot of you guys in the audience now, most of your business is probably somewhere in between. And not surprisingly, we use a combination of both the pipe math and, the quarter and quarter trending math in conjunction with the MEDPIC and a more formalized sales process to be able to pull everything together and be able to forecast accurately across your entire business. So with that said, let's dive into SMB forecasting. As you can see, there's a lot of things to consider on this slide. You can very easily overwhelm yourself with data, with information, with different methodologies. You can end up, being paralyzed with analysis and just totally boiling the ocean and getting nowhere, to be frank. Jaimie and I try to approach this in two main buckets. I'm not going to go through every single bullet point here. I know you guys can all read. But the two main buckets that we really look at are, first and foremost, up here on the left-hand side, the data and science behind forecasting, especially for the SMB space where it's very high velocity. This piece is, what you would typically think of as, forecast math, spreadsheets, trending, leading indicators, just looking at the numbers and the math to really inform a number that makes sense for you. The other bucket, which is overlooked oftentimes, and I would say maybe as important as the number and data, is this whole bucket of external factors and qualitative things that happen within your company that will affect your sales, especially in the SMB space where it is so high velocity and where these types of things, product changes or marketing A/B tests will affect your sales given how high velocity the deal cycle is. And then very importantly also is just taking all these data points, trying not to be, inundated and drowning in the data. How do you actually make sense of the data, and how do you triangulate to get to a number that you, at the end of the day, feel comfortable with? And that's where triangulation comes into play. So at Zendesk, for instance, we have at any given point between 4 to 5 different forecasts going on just for Jaimie's business. So for instance, my team and I, we have our crazy spreadsheet math, and it's probably indecipherable to most people. Jaimie and her leaders have their director and VP roll-up math, which is a little bit of a different take on how they get to a number. Finance typically runs their bookings forecast, and then our data and analytics team has a more statistically driven approach to actually getting to the number we will land at the end of the quarter. And
with all of those data points, Jaimie is then able to, in conjunction with the external factors that we're showing here, and her gut, just being in customer conversations, having conversations with her leadership team, she is then able to triangulate and understand and feel very comfortable with the range where she'll land and what her commit will be for the quarter. And that's super important. So that was probably TLDR. And for those of you who don't know what TLDR means, it stands for too long, didn't read. What actually matters at the end of the day, right? And in my experience, having supported sales teams at well-oiled machines like Salesforce, as well as scrappy startups like Slack, it really boils down to these few drivers up here. So on the data and science side, trending super important, especially for SMB, especially for high velocity. Looking at day over day, week over week, month over month, year over year, depending on your deal cycle. Looking at percent mix. So, if your month 3 is higher than your month 1 usually, if you're a typical SaaS company, if you see a hockey stick growth in Q4 versus Q1, all these things will help you inform where you land in any given quarter. Also very important is pacing and leading indicators, again, especially for the SMB space. So as Jaimie alluded to, we were within 1% of our commit all of last year until Q4 when, everything was crazy in Q4 as usual, and we took our eye off the ball for a hot moment, and we ended up missing our commit by almost 4%, which again is within industry standard, but did not hit our high standards for forecasting that Jaimie and I have for ourselves. And this all was due to the fact that we missed quite a bit in our SMB segment because, we weren't looking at the MQL lead volume or pipe generation volume. The other big bucket of things that you need are, all of the different, is it off? Back on? Thank you. All of the other internal changes within your company, and I'll touch upon this in the next slide. And then very importantly also, business seasonality. So this is something that's often overlooked as well. And when I say seasonality, I mean seasonality of your product as well as your customers' industries. So for instance, we all probably know Q1 will not be a great sales quarter for if you're selling to the federal government or if you're selling to the retail industry, just due to the fiscal year end and the business seasonality of the retail space. So a few more things when you're pulling everything together. It's really important, especially given how matrixed and complex our business is. It's really important to have a mutually exclusive and completely exhaustive framework when you pull everything together. So for those of you ex-consultants in the room, that stands for MECE framework. And it's really important to make sure you're not overlapping different parts of your business so that you're not double counting parts of your business. And on the other side of the coin, that you're not leaving parts of the business out of your final number when you call a number. And then finally here, always do try to keep the big picture in mind. When you're calling up a number to your board or your CEO or your CXO, execs at the end of the day just want to know what is your path to hit your number and what is your path to overachieve your number, and also how comfortable are you with that path. So what are your upsides and risks to hitting your commit? And I think, as long as you feel comfortable with that narrative and telling that story, then you'll be in really good shape every week when you have to call a number. All right, and then before I hand off the baton to Jaimie, we just wanted to share a few lessons learned and key mistakes to avoid, especially when you're running an SMB business and forecasting the SMB space. So not surprisingly, first and foremost, you need to have a cohesive go-to-market strategy between sales, product, and marketing. And everyone in this room probably understands that, and it's much easier said than done. I totally understand. One quick way to sort of solve this kind of issue and to sort of close that feedback loop is at Zendesk, for instance, this past year, we've started a regular cadence of communicating when sales, marketing, or product makes a big change or initiative. We want to make sure that all three legs of the stool are aligned and understand, if there are going to be any downstream effects or dependencies on these things. Another way to sort of help with this is rolling out pipeline review meetings. So I've done this at Salesforce. We started this at Zendesk, where you have marketing and sales meet every single week to, again, get aligned on changes either in the funnel or in the sales process. And this is very, very important, especially in the SMB space. Next on this slide, again, not surprising, but you definitely need to remember to hire enough butts in seats so that you can actually, hit your number. You need to have enough firepower and capacity. And especially as you scale, you're going to need to train that muscle memory of being outbounding and, building a proactive sales team as well as continuing to support your reactive sales team. And then finally, I think Jaimie and my favorite philosophy, keep it simple, stupid. You don't want to overcomplicate qualification, right? Especially in the SMB space. BANT is a tried and true method. It works. It might not work for the enterprise space. Jaimie will touch upon that. But it works in the SMB space quite well. And then from a scaling and operations perspective, having more simple processes and operations will allow you and empower you to scale your business in a more efficient and effective way. And then the last thing I do want to leave you with is, since I am representing operations at this forum, forecasting is a weekly affair, and it takes a lot of time and mind share from each and every one of you and everyone on your team. So I highly encourage you to take the time to really roll out a rigorous process and leverage all the tools and systems at your fingertips. Lean on your finance and operations business partners so that you can really take your time and focus it on what you do best, which is marketing, selling, and closing deals. And with that, I will hand the baton off to Jaimie. She will be touching upon the more formalized sales process and MedPick, which will be more useful for forecasting the enterprise space. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. One clicker, please. Thank you. Okay, I have 12 minutes to talk about sales process and medic. So let's see how I can get across without having to speed talk. One of the things that I really realized that I've done, I think, better at Zendesk than I have in prior lives is when I look at sales process, I kind of look at it from a different perspective than I used to, right? I used to look at it from my perspective. What have I, as the rep, or what have my reps accomplished? But at Zendesk, I've really flipped that on how do I know I'm there because of actions the customer has taken. So I'm going to walk you through some examples here. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it because I could spend an hour on this topic, actually. Not going to bore you, though. It's literally 11 minutes. Okay. So qualify, instead of saying the meeting is qualified because my rep set met criteria, I'm going to say it's qualified because the customer agreed to a discovery call. Right? That's why it's going to be in stage 1. If it's in stage 2, then I know that the people attended the discovery call and that the key stakeholders attended. Right? So when I'm going through my forecast call with my reps, if it's in stage 3, this one's super critical for me. And the reason I really, really care about stage 3 is because do nothing is not on the table, right? So if I look at it, I know I probably don't have the technical win yet, and I know that the customer can still do nothing. I have a deal that's been sitting in my funnel that my boss keeps asking me about, and so does my VP of operations who's in the audience. That deal is still in stage 3. Why? Because do nothing is still on the table. They can still renew the contract with their existing customer. So once I have this laid out, I can easily tell, all right, that's still a long shot for me. So when Ron talks about pipe math, if I have that 50K deal, 50K MRR in long shot, then that's where I'm going to have it in the 3rd month of the quarter because it's still haven't won technically and I still know that they can do nothing. If I've confirmed technical selection, but I still have to maybe I have to work out the paper process because remember that the goal here is to nail the timing. There are some enterprise customers, which I know you've all worked with before, that, yeah, they need to negotiate the MSA, which can take forever. So you need to figure out, is it outside counsel, is it inside counsel? That makes a difference, right? Do they have to cut a PO and an SO? How many signatures are needed for both? So I'm not going to commit this thing until I understand all those things that's going to happen. So that's what's happening in stage 4 for us. In stage 5, I've got the economic buyer confirms the decision, and now I'm in contracting. So this is basically stage 5 is going to be a commit for me. So if I have something in stage 5, it's going to be in VP commit. I have the technical win. I know I have the timeline. I have the timeline to get it done, and I have an accurate close date. So for me, stage 5, my reps are very reluctant to put it in stage 5. But I will oftentimes see in stage 4, I'm like, yeah, shouldn't that be in stage 5? Because you have all the other markers. And then obviously closes opportunity book. So this has been extremely helpful for me as a VP looking through the deals, because now that I've got the team trained on this, I don't have to worry about my sales stages anymore. When I first got to Zendesk, I did not know what the sales stages meant. It could have meant anything. So who in this room subscribes to Medic? Okay, there is a handful so some of this is going to be a repeat for some of you. For those of you that don't use it, this is actually the first company that I fully have used and I use MedPick. I do insert the P. I'll walk you through that in a second. I have subscribed to this as a qualification methodology that I stripe across my sales process. So sales process is piece number 1. Piece number 2 is going to be MedPick. Let me make sure that went to the next one. Okay. So I'm going to give you an example of a metric that one of my reps used in a deal that recently won us a deal. A metric is a quantifiable reason why the customer is going to want to move forward with you. So one of the examples, this rep put together an awesome proposal, very short, but as part of it, she included how much money it was costing them, how much money the support agent costs, then how much a ticket costs to resolve. Then compared that to how less expensive a text was to resolve than a phone call. She then made a summary that showed if you do performance-based payment for your agents and you divert 10% of your calls to text, you're going to save $200,000 a year. I was only going to be $50,000 a year. The customer brought that to their executive and was like, look, this thing pays for itself, right? So that's what I mean when I talk about metrics. I'm always asking the team, quantify it for me. What does that actually mean to the client in terms of a bottom line? So economic buyer, you guys are probably looking at that. Yeah, economic buyer is like who has the budget. Slight difference here that makes a very big difference. I care who has the budget, but mostly I care who can move the budget. Let's say you're trying to sell to me, right? If you're trying to sell to me, there's some instances in which I have a budget that I can operate in, and I can move money from one place to another. So I know there's certain situations where I am the economic buyer. There's other situations where I don't have the budget and I have to go to my boss. I can be a champion in that instance. I cannot be the economic buyer. So this has really taught us when I'm talking through deals with reps, I'm asking 2 things. Do you know who the economic buyer is who can move the money, and have you met with them? If they don't know who it is, that score is a 0 on economic buyer. If they know who it is and hasn't met with them, that's a score of 1. If they've met with them and have a relationship with that person and could actually pick them up and call them on the phone, that's going to be a 2. Because the other piece that I do is these all have a score within Salesforce, and my deals will show up as red, yellow, or green. And economic buyer is one of the very, very key points here. Decision criteria. This is kind of motherhood and apple pie, right? You got to understand how they're going to be making the decision and what are the technical requirements. One of the things here that I really like, if you guys haven't used them, I call it a lockout document. So does my prior boss, who I know spoke here last year, so maybe you've heard of that. But a lockout document is a test plan that if a customer wants to do a POC, you provide them with a test plan that really highlights what you do well. And if I know I'm competing against other competitors who won't be mentioned in this conversation, if I know I'm competing against whoever I'm competing against, I'm going to specifically make sure that test plan lines it up so that I shine and I know where they're not going to shine, right? So that's an important piece you can work with your solutions consulting or sales engineering group is, do you guys have a lockout document for test plans? I also need to know who all the key players are. I sell to the LOB, which is typically support. It could be IT, it could be HR. I sell to the LOB, but as you guys know, as deals gets bigger, IT is going to be involved, and it gets a lot more complex, and sometimes this rolls up to marketing, and the CMO needs to sign off on it. So this is, you guys know this is not rocket science. Everyone is aware of that. I did include the paper process for Medic. A lot of times people just use Medic with 1 C and no P. I use the P because what we're finding is we have a lot of paperwork that needs to be done in our deals, and a lot of times with the enterprise customers, they need to sign an SO, but they also need to sign a PO. different people need to sign all that. It takes a lot longer. And I was misforecasting the date of deals because the reps hadn't lined up all of the paperwork that had to be done. So now I can ask, and I know to keep things in best case, I won't move them to commit until I know that that paperwork can be done in time. And I've gotten caught a few times with misforecasting the commit date because of this. Still, we all make mistakes. This one is really interesting. So identified pain, you can also think of this as you got to have pending event, right? And pending event I kind of build in here, but sometimes there is a pending event. Sometimes the building is burning down for the customer. We have one customer that we're in the process of closing right now. I'm not going to jinx myself, but they're using email today to triage their support. They are literally misplacing and not being able to track when their customers are reaching out to them. They just got a huge round of funding. They're doing phenomenally well, but their customers are getting really upset. And you know, the number one thing with support is you lose your loyalty a lot easier than you can gain it when you're dealing with, because people are already pissed. If you're calling support, it's not because you're happy, right? So these guys really need to get something up and running quickly. I won the technical win, and they have their own pending event because their house is burning down. Like, they've got to get this fixed or they're going to lose their customers. In other cases, they're on another platform and they can renew that other platform. Their building is not burning down. They can revert and renew that other product, right? I have to create the pain of why were you considering looking to begin with, and I need to take that knife and I need to twist it till they bleed. And usually to do that, you have to drill down to what is it costing you to stay on the current platform. If I'm one of the other competitors that takes 5 admins, I'm like, well, how much do you pay each of those admins? How much more are you going to have to pay them for another year? Let's really think about how much this is going to cost you if you decide to delay this project longer. So identified pain has to come down to dollars. It can't just be a simple pending event. A lot of times people think they have champions, but what they actually have are coaches, right? Who's been stuck thinking before that they have a champion, but really what they have is a coach? It happens to all of us. What a coach is, someone who likes to give you information. They can tell you who's who. They can tell you how to get things done. But what do they not have? They don't have power. They don't have influence, and they probably don't have something to gain, right? I'm looking for someone who, if they deploy my product, they're gonna get a promotion. They're going to have something new on their resume that's going to make them be better in their own career. And I test their power. That's a really important piece of this. How do I test their power? Here's a really good one. The customer wants to negotiate on their paper. Who loves negotiating on the customer's paper? No one, because it's a nightmare, right? You want a manufacturing company to give you their SaaS version of the contract? Please, right? That's 6 months, 3 to 6 months. If I have a strong champion, this is when I go to legal, up to my own legal, and I say, listen, don't worry about it. I got a champion. I'm going to take my champion, I'm going to have them go push on the legal in the company and tell them, we'll walk you through, we'll incorporate the things that are critical to you, but we're going to have to use our paper to do this deal. We're going to have to walk away. If I have a real champion, they'll go to legal and they'll sell that. And then I know that they're going to ask for unlimited liability and all those other things, and term for convenience and all that other stuff that customers love to ask for. But now I know I have a real champion, and when they ask for things I can't do, I can have my champion go sell internally for me and say, listen, dude, we got to get this deal done, but I can't do X, Y, or Z. I can do this, but help me. Who do I need to sell to internally to get this done? So having a real champion, if I have a champion, I know that I have a much better chance of getting through that legal negotiation. And then last but not least is obviously the competition. I think some people only have one C. I add the competition because I compete with a lot of vendors on a lot of ends of the market. I compete on the low end with a lot of startups. I compete on the high end with the usual suspects. So for me, it's very important to know what the client is considering and then how I'm going to position myself, because it's going to go back to making the decision. So I've got 20 seconds left. I'm going to leave you with the 3 things. If you take anything away from MedPick, there are 3 of them that matter the most. I score these higher than I score any of the other ones. Yeah, you got to know the other ones. So I know I've got some reps in the audience. You got to know them all. However, there's 3 that will determine if you can win the deal. One is economic buyer, your access to them, and your relationship with them. Because at the end of the day, if they don't have the money, this person can get you the money. If they don't feel the pain urgently enough, they will delay and do nothing, because do nothing is always our biggest competition as salespeople, always. And last but not least, I'm not going to get through that legal negotiation if I don't have a true champion. So these 3 things alone, I think, have increased our forecast accuracy on the bigger deals significantly. I can now look at my Q2 funnel and know exactly where to put them in my forecast categories, because I can walk with my team and ask them any of these questions. I've now gone over by 40 seconds, but I think I did pretty darn well considering how much I just packed into that. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, appreciate your time.